This episode of Walt Disney World Today is being sponsored by Owner's Locker, and Owner's Locker is a great service for you to try out for your next trip to Walt Disney World. It allows you to have all of your stuff that you usually bring to your trip to Walt Disney World stored for you in Orlando, so that on your next subsequent trips down to Walt Disney World, all your stuff is waiting for you. So it's less stuff for you to pack, less luggage you'll need. It's a great service that I personally use when I stay on Walt Disney World property, so why not go on and give them a try? Visit them at www.ownerslacker.com.
This is Walt Disney World Today. Give us 5 minutes and we'll give you the world.
It's Monday, June 30th, 2008, and this is episode 429 of Walt Disney World Today. I'm Matt Hodgeberg of StudiosCentral.com. On the show today, we have Mike Newell of MouseWorldRadio.com. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Mike. Hey, Mikey, how you doing?
Hey, Mike.
Also on the show today, we have Mike Scopa of allears.net. Welcome, Mike.
Don't hit it. It's sensitive.
That would be sounds dangerous.
That's right. 2 in a row from the same attraction.
Wow. And also on the show today, we have Annette Owens of MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. How are you, Annette?
Oh, I'm just fine. Happy Monday to everybody.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Woo.
Sorry you have to go to work. So sorry. Monday.
It was quite a weekend, huh?
Yeah, boy, everything that happened that weekend was just, wow, I can't begin to tell you what happened that weekend.
That live show last night was the bomb.
It may have bombed. Also, on today's show, we're going to be talking about kind of a primer, if you will, for planning a trip in general to Walt Disney World, because a lot of people kind of go with a certain assumption in terms of what they should book when, and there's going to be some confusion. And we wanted to talk a little bit about that. Now, Scopa, you brought this idea up, and I think it's an interesting idea. Why don't you dive into this a little bit more?
I think that a lot of people, when they haven't gone to Walt Disney World in a while, wonder what exactly would be the best practice in regards to what order of the pieces of the vacation do you need to look at, and how should you piece together the vacation so that you get the best for your money, for your time, and your effort. And I think it's important for us to talk about that and give our own ideas as to what we think is the best sequence to do things. For instance, when do you book your room? Do you book your room before you book your airfare? How do you decide whether you're going to get the dining plan? When do you make your ADRs? Things like that. And I think that, putting this out on the table may help some of our listeners who have either never gone to Walt Disney World and are planning their first trip, or who haven't been down there in a while and are wondering if things are different than they had been in the past.
That's a good point, Mike. So I want to go to Annette here, the travel expert. And Annette, if a client comes to you and says, "Okay, I'm ready to book my trip to Walt Disney World," in a perfect world, what do you have them book first?
In a perfect world, everything would work just fine, and cheap air would be on the same day that they wanted to go down and on the way that they wanted to come back up. Obviously, you're going to have to check out your options for that. A lot of times I recommend that, obviously they need to know the time frame they're wanting to go, maybe the week, maybe give or take a day. Make sure the resort's available. Let's go on and hold that. When you're working with a travel planner, we can hold that while you go and search for your air. So if we need to scale it down a little bit because of air pricing, we can do that. I guess something else to go ahead.
I was going to say, so you're saying resort first.
I'm seeing resort first on a hold and then go search the air price. But in some situations, the air may come down even after you've booked. So it's a continual process.
Oh, that's for sure. I mean, it's not. We may say, okay, well, it's this first, and this second, and this third. But really, what there is like Annette said, there could be things going on concurrently to what you're doing, and resort may be, I think, something that is something I think we all agree is probably something you have to definitely focus on in the beginning. Scopa?
I agree with Annette. And my own reason for saying that is that it's a lot easier for me to book my room far further out than it is for me to book my air. I use Southwest, and I can't book until I'm within 6 months or so, or whenever they open up their book. So this way I can take care of my room, I can start paying for it earlier on, so that by the time I get to the vacation time, I mean, it's paid for. And it's one less thing to worry about. It's the most important thing to me is to secure my room so I can stay at the resort I want to, and I can have the dates I want to. And the earlier out, the further out that I book my room, the more likelihood I will get to have the resort and the nights that I want. So that's my reason.
Absolutely, Mike. I think, it's interesting that you brought up. A lot of times airfare, like on Southwest, for instance, doesn't come out until there's only a small time window for you to book. And certainly there aren't the best deals if you're booking 9 to 12 months out on airfare necessarily. So it behooves you to probably book your hotel first, simply because you're gonna have an idea for what resort you want to stay at. And putting a hold on it or booking it just ahead of time gives you that advantage rather than waiting for the airfare first. And of course, you can always cancel the resort reservations if things don't work out. If it becomes obviously with airfare, something we talked about last week in our episodes, that can always change. It can be too expensive, but you can always cancel your resort. You can't necessarily cancel the airfare.
That's right.
Right. I think something else to remember too is especially somebody that's wanting a Magic Kingdom view at the Contemporary, maybe an All-Star Suite at Music, some of the more popular places.
Mm-hmm.
You really want to go on and book that. If that's really what you want, you need to make sure it's there.
Absolutely.
Some of your special rooms.
Yep. You definitely have to look into that. Now I'm going to go one step further. We said resorts are very important. I think the next thing to consider before anything else is really going to be where your dining plans. And a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to go to Walt Disney World next year and we're going to get the dining plan. But Scope, I think you'd agree with me that maybe you should do a little more work with something else before you decide if the dining plan is right for you or isn't right for you.
You're absolutely right, Matt. Recently I received an email from an old colleague of mine who was planning a family vacation, and she was asking about the dining plan. Not only was she asking about if it was worth it, but she was asking whether she should go with the basic one or the deluxe or the platinum or whatever. And the first thing I said to her was, don't even start thinking about the dining plan until you are sure that you'll be able to get into the restaurants that you want, because let's face it, not every restaurant is worth a table credit. We talked about things like making sure you get into your restaurants and understanding exactly what your eating habits are going to be. And one of the things I said to her is that you may not be able to get into all the restaurants, and you may be able to get into some, and some of them may be really expensive restaurants. So you may want to figure out how you would use your table credits. Like if I'm eating at Trails End, I'm not going to use a table credit. If I'm eating at the Plaza, I'm not going to be using my table credit because I want to save it for something else. So what I'm saying, Matt, again, is make sure that you have your reservations and then determine if the dining plan would be for you.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, Mike, you mentioned some places where it's so inexpensive, relatively speaking, that it's not a good idea. On the flip side, there are lots of places that are very expensive that it's not worth it for you to use the dining plan, like Yachtsman Steakhouse, for instance, because we kind of have a basic agreement here among all of us that none of the 2 table service credit meals are worth 2 table service credits, and if you're going to have a couple of them, well, it's not worth it.
Nope.
Newell, what do you think about all this?
Well, it's funny. You talk about not getting the dining plan. For a trip in August, I called up with about 20 different ADRs for just to get, ADRs for lunch and for dinner for a 10-day trip. And out of the 20 that I asked for, I was only able to get 1 dinner. So if I had the plan, I'd have to, revamp everything I was planning on doing. And now I'm thinking maybe I'll just, skip some of the main places that I like to go and either go off site or go, to like Olivia's or something at a resort that isn't as popular or isn't as crowded. So, the dining plan is worth nothing to me at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the flip side, you may find yourself getting a lot of these great ADRs and saying, hey, it makes perfect sense.
Right.
So, you have to, resort, dining, those kinds of things. It's something that you have to do ahead of time because that can make your trip. Maybe you're going to, a lot of people I think will go into this and they'll go and they'll book. Okay, they're going to go book. And I really want to stay at Port Orleans. Well, Port Orleans is sold out. Okay, I'll stay at I don't know, some other reason, then your next resort, and that one might not be available or not available at the rate you're interested in. Like, let's say you're trying to take advantage of an annual pass rate. And so you might say, and then you look at the ADRs, there's nothing really coming up there either. And you might say, well, maybe this isn't the best time. Let me try moving my trip around. And again, this is why we emphasize this over booking your airfare first, because you would have booked the airfare and you would have been pretty much locked in. I mean, obviously with Southwest, there's a little more flexibility because they don't charge you the penalties, but still, it's probably best to, I think we agree with all of that.
I'm really surprised. Mike, you mean you couldn't make like 20 ADRs at Nine Dragons?
Nine Dragons is closed, my friend.
Yeah, that's right. They're under rehab.
That's right.
Oh.
It's the only reason.
It's a sore subject with me, Scopey. You should know better.
So once you have this kind of keeping the resorts and dining in mind, Annette, where do tickets factor into this?
Tickets, once you start looking at your ADRs, sometimes you got to go with your ADRs first. Sometimes you need to look at, after you get the resort, you're kind of locked in. People start talking about, I want to go off property, go to SeaWorld, go to Universal, those other places.
Why?
I know, but when they start, some people think they can do all of Orlando in 3 days, so just can't do it.
You can drive by it on 4 and it's just very nice. Oh, there it is. Oh, okay. Moving on.
But your tickets, just like we were saying, you can kind of adjust your plan. Until you're paid in full, you can adjust your tickets. So that's something, too, that you can play with, because in the beginning, especially somebody that's never been, they might not understand that park hopping would benefit them. So, it takes a little time to figure out exactly what you need as you're starting to plan.
Yeah, I think it's an important factor. Scopa?
This another thing that ties into all of this, and I think a lot of people forget about it, and that is that when you should check to see what the the calendar looks like for the time that you're down there, so that you can take note as to when the extra magic hours are and try to coordinate that with your park touring habits. For instance, if you know that Magic Kingdom is having an extra magic morning on one of the days that you're there, maybe that would be the day that you schedule the Crystal Palace breakfast. For the same manner, if you know that Epcot is having an extra magic hour evening, maybe that's the evening that you try to book a late dinner at Le Cellier, because that would be an opportunity for you to be in the park a little bit later. So I think that people have to keep that in mind, that the ADRs that they make, that the touring plans that they make, are connected in some way. And in fact, the extra magic hours plus the advanced dining reservations actually will determine which parks you will visit on which days.
Oh, I think you bring up an excellent point there, Mike. And a lot of this, is a very fluid thing. We're talking about this linearly because that's what we have to, as things come up here in the show. But a lot of stuff we're talking about, again, it's all very concurrent, and you may look at it, and it's just important to emphasize these elements because we think that it's something important to consider when you're booking your trip. Because again, you want to make sure that obviously you want to have a trip that's going to be quote unquote perfect. Everyone always tries to go for that. And that's something that is certainly important. Annette, what are some other aspects of trip planning that I think any of your clients in the past have been important for them to really adhere to?
I think, the ADRs, 180 days out, don't forget you have those plus 10 for,
right.
From the day you check in, if you're only going for a 9-day trip, you can do all of your ADRs with one call. So don't forget that, because that can come in very handy. The other thing is the special parties, and I know that, we're down on those, but somebody going down to Halloween and they're thinking about the party tickets, that's something to think about and look at your planning for the day. Are you going to go in the park that day? If you're going to the and Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween party or the Christmas party.
Yeah, you want to make those plans also. I mean, first of all, you get advanced purchase discount, which is always a good thing. A little money saved here it makes up for it, especially with larger parties. If you could save, $5 a person or whatever it is, a party of 5, that's $25 right there. That's part of a meal.
5 Mickey bars.
Yeah, there you go. So always important to keep that in mind. And, a lot of these elements, again, it's just to reinforce the basic concept, I think, that everyone who goes down to Walt Disney World, who plans these trips, needs to keep these important things in mind. And I think it's really going to benefit you in the long run in terms of keeping your trip just better overall. Well, that does it for us today. I want to mention again that this episode of Walt Disney World Today has been sponsored by Owner's Locker. And when you're planning everything, your trip days, your ADRs, and what days you're going to the park and your resort, don't forget about Owner's Locker, because that's really a key element of it too, because they can make for a much easier trip for you overall, because all your stuff can be waiting for you in Orlando. And that way, on your subsequent trips to Walt Disney World, you'll have all your stuff delivered to your resort in your Owner's Locker, and it just makes your life so much easier. It's something that I use on all of my trips that I stay on Walt Disney World property. It's a great service, so why not give them a try? Visit them at www.ownerslocker.com. And if you want to find our older episodes, read our show notes, or send us your comments, visit the Walt Disney World Today website at www.wdwtoday.com. For Lentesta, Mike Scopa, Mike Newell, and the fabulous Annette Owens, I am Matt Hochberg. We'll see you on the next show.
This has been a production of Mouse World Radio.